Hi there. Today we're gonna be ranking the states of the Eastern Zhou period. That is from the Spring and Autumn and Warring States period. Similar to our last video, the rating criteria is gonna be these 7, but military strength, economic situation, and a new one, which is influence over other states, is gonna be the most important here. I added the last one just because of how important, interstate diplomacy is during this era. Also, it's been a year, almost a year, since I've made a tier list video. The other one is re-uploaded from another channel that I had. But yeah, we're gonna do this. So, yeah, we'll just get in alphabetical order. The first, actually no, I'm gonna do this first. I'm gonna set some benchmarks for S and F tier. So, well, S tier is pretty easy. It's gonna be the state of Qin. Oh, by the way, the people, so I should use an app or some weird website for tier lists. I think those only work with pictures, and Google Slides is fine. But yeah, state of Qin, this one's pretty easy. Most famous for unifying China. Obviously under the first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. By the way, a title he invented for himself, the word emperor. But I'd say we can put a lot of weight onto the achievements of his predecessors and reformist ministers, such as the Duke Xiao of Qin and Shangyang, the great legalist. Actually, they were extremely strong during the Spring and Autumn period, considered one of the 4 great states along with Jin, Chu, and Qi. They have a hegemon of their own, which is, I believe, Duke Mu of Qin. A hegemon was just someone during the Spring and Autumn period who had asserted themselves diplomatically or militarily dominant over the other states. They do enter a bit of a decline during the early Warring States period. They get bogged down trying to invade Sichuan with the states of Shu and Ba, but that does pay off, and they adopt legalism to a greater extent than the other states. So, legalism, you're probably familiar with it already, but basically, recruiting based off meritocracy. There's more land organization, private ownership of land by the peasants. It's very much a ruler-centered state, and the goal is to efficiently mobilize resources, such as the economy and manpower and labor. And Qin did that very effectively. So it had an extremely strong army and an extremely robust economy. Couple that with an initially poor but very geographically advantageous and defendable position in the Guangzhou area. And yeah, you've got a recipe for a real unifier of China. Since we're not considering what happened to them afterwards, we'll just put them in S tier. Now, our benchmark for F tier is going to be this little state called Western Guo. God, not this problem again. Here it is. Damn. Sorry. Come on. There we go. Yeah. But these guys are gonna basically represent every other state that's not mentioned. Well, there's actually a few medium-sized ones, and I'll mention them later, but every other state besides that is going to be Western Guo. And the reason for that is because they were A, very small, and B, are most known for being conquered by a bigger state, in this case, Jin. There's actually a very funny story involving Western Guo and Jin. That is, the Duke of Jin asked for military access to another state to invade Western Guo, and then after invading Western Guo, they swung around and then invaded the state that they had asked for military access from. I believe the state of Yu. But yeah, actually they might be a better example because that's an even more pathetic story. But yeah, they're gonna represent basically everyone, including the Eastern Zhou dynasty. You know what, why not just add them? Yeah, Eastern Zhou, well, they're obviously the rump state of Western Zhou, which got shattered by the Western Rung invasion. And like, God, 770 something BC. And I mean, the only reason they don't die is just because everyone's trying to like, oh, respect the Zhongfa and the Fengjian and the feudalism ties. But yeah, even the king of Qin, Zhao Xiang, got sick of that, so he annexed Eastern Zhou. Okay. But yeah, now we can go alphabetically. So, first off, we're gonna have the state of Chu. Very interesting origins. They actually aren't part of the traditional Zhou feudal Huaxia system, so they're not a Huaxia state, so they weren't like a Zhou successor state. They were actually in the south, and somewhat contributed to the decline of the Zhou dynasty when King Zhao of Zhou led a disastrous invasion of Chu and himself got killed. Chu, during the spring and autumn period, expands a ton, especially to the north and the east. This actually causes a lot of anxiety among the different Huaxia states. Quite a few coalitions are organized against it, and a few hegemons, most notably Duke Huan of Qi and Duke Wen of Jin, try to check the expansion of Chu, although that was always only temporarily. Absolutely terrifying state in the spring and autumn period. So they got a lot of points for that, and they grow really big, but that also kind of leads to their decadence during the Warring States period. Their adoption of legalism under, for example, the general Wu Qi is not to the same extent as the other states, and they become pretty easy prey for Qin, which just takes big chunks out of it. It does get resurrected after the Qin dynasty under Xiang Yu, but that doesn't go well. Now, just for their massive territorial size and superb military achievements during the first half of this period, I think Chu can comfortably go into A tier. Alright, next up, alphabetically might not be good. You know, I'm gonna save Han, Zhao, and Wei for later, because we need to start with the state that they succeeded. Another extremely powerful state, at least early on, that is the state of Jin. Wow, Jin is based out of modern-day Shanxi. They are a Huaxia state. Actually, early on, they're kind of like emasculated by civil war between the Zhiwo branch and the traditional Jin branch. Actually, the Zhiwo branch wins out. But after that, they basically dominate, like, extremely well. This is especially with the dukes Xian of Jin and Wen of Jin. Wen of Jin is a pretty interesting character. He's like in his 60s when he actually took the throne. He had been exiled for a few dozen years before that, gathered a ton of very capable followers himself. And Duke Wen of Jin also helps to establish Jin as the hegemon for the next three, generations, which is quite impressive. They also have a pretty good geographic position. The highlands of Shanxi are fairly defensible, but they're close enough to the central plains to be able to project their power onto it quite easily. They're also, early on, the biggest rival of Chu and defeated a few times, most notably at the Battle of Chengpu. Actually, the wars between Jin and Chu contribute quite a bit to the decline of the states in the Central Plains because, I mean, they're just caught in the crossfire between these two giants. Now, unfortunately, what Jin is most known for is collapsing in the 400s BC. It's a very slow and painful process, but essentially the three noble families of Han, Zhao, and Wei defeat the Zhi clan, and they grow more powerful and partition Jin into three. This is called the Partition of Jin, and actually marks the transition from the Spring and Autumn period to the Warring States period. Given our knowledge that these three successor states, especially Zhao and Wei, were very powerful in their own right, it's fair to assume that if Jin did not collapse, perhaps in an alternate scenario where the Zhi clan wins the civil war, then they probably would have unified China instead of Qin. Well, that's my theory at least. That's just how powerful they were. So, similar to Chu, for their extreme early power, but then later collapse, I think we can put them also quite comfortably into A tier. Shoot. Anyways, next up, State of Lu. This one is most famous for being the birthplace of Confucius, and pretty much nothing else impressive. I'm kind of salty that the abbreviation for Shandong, which is the modern day province, is Lu instead of Qi, because Lu was a relatively small state, well, medium-sized state, but I mean, Qi is literally the unifier of Shandong. It's the same shape and stuff and geography. God, it's just that, oh, Lu has Confucius. Everyone loves Confucius. God. Yeah, I'll put them in D tier. I don't like them very much. They're just one of those high-browed Central Plain states. Declines, of course, slowly over time. Actually, the Three Huan family kind of does something almost similar to Jin, where they almost divide the country. And Confucius himself did have a role in trying to put down that power struggle. Yeah, that was the Three Huans. Otherwise, Lu, nothing too notable, I think. Was the philosopher Mozi born there? He might have been. I don't know, man. Next up, wow, another big one. Qi, this one I was just talking about. Also, they're in the Shandong Peninsula, a very rich position, especially because it's the mouth of the Yellow River. They have a few moments of being very powerful, both in the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods. First case of them being powerful in the Spring and Autumn period was under the Duke Huan of Qi. He's the first confirmed hegemon. You could make an argument for an earlier guy, but I'm not too convinced. But Duke Huan of Qi is quite a cool guy. He actually seems quite devoted to the idea of trying to keep the Huaxia realm intact. He defends, for example, the states of Yan, Xing, and Wei against multiple barbarian incursions, and even invades the state of Cai, which was a Chu satellite state, because of course Chu was also a barbarian state. Unfortunately, after Duke Huan of Qi dies, there's a absolutely crippling succession crisis, and she doesn't really regain that dominance ever until much later on, which I'll cover. Well, succession crises are, as you'll see, a very common theme during this era. Basically every state suffers a crippling one at some point, but Qi's just was particularly devastating. Another interesting succession situation with Qi is that during the transition from the Spring and Autumn to the Warring States period, they're usurped by the Tian clan. Although, oddly enough, the name of the state doesn't actually change, it just becomes Tianqi. But yeah, they are just usurpers. And then the kind of resurgence I mentioned was much later in the Warring States period. Essentially, during the late Warring States period, the states of China had organized into two coalitions. The first was the Qin-led horizontal alliance, in which Qin tried to ally a few small states, but most importantly break the vertical alliance, which was a coalition spanning roughly from north to south that was trying to contain Qin dominance and maintain the balance of power. Qi seems to be the only leader of the vertical alliance that's actually successful. The other two were Wei and Zhao, but they get annihilated by Qin, that is. Qi actually enters the Guangzhou region, which is quite a feat, but they get overexcited and they eat into all the other states a little and even annex the state of Song. And they get full occupied by an anti-Qi coalition, and sadly, lacking the geography of Qin, they never recover from that. But, given their continued, status as a great power and influencer, I think Qi can deserve to be in A tier with Chu Wenjin. Actually, quite nicely, we have the four great powers of the spring and autumn period right at the top here. During the spring and autumn period, the two main ones would have been Jin and Chu, while Qin and Qi would have been lesser but still quite formidable great powers, and obviously that changes later on. Shen Guo, the state of Shen. These are going to be similar to Western Guo in that they're going to represent a large group of states, medium-sized states specifically, and I'm going to kind of summarize all of them a little. So first state is going to be a little one called Dai, like kind of half barbarian, half Huaxia. They're in the northeast, whereas Yan and Zhao. But Yan and Zhao also take a lot of military influence from these northern steppe semi-nomads. We're also going to have Lai Yi. These are in the eastern Shandong Peninsula. They weren't actually conquered by the Zhou, but they were conquered by Qi later on. Lai Yi is pretty, well, the term Yi is pretty interesting because, well, it means Dong Yi, Eastern Barbarian, which first referred to Eastern Shandong. And then after that got Sinicized, it became Korea. After Korea got somewhat Sinicized, especially during the Ming Dynasty, it then applied to Japan being the Eastern Barbarians. So yeah. Then we have the two Sichuan states, Shu and Ba. Shu civilization is actually pretty interesting because that was where the Senxing Dui culture originated and stemmed out of. But they are most known for being conquered by Qin and being kind of a breadbasket for them. Because they didn't really improve on the irrigation of Sichuan, but Qin does. I believe the Mian River was redirected by Qin to be a lot more efficient. Next we have the state of Xu. These guys, well, actually all of these guys lie outside of the Huaxia realm, but Xu especially, similar to Chu, opposed Zhou expansion quite handily, although by the time of the collapse of Western Zhou, they too had become quite weak. And they're situated in the southeast near the state of Wu. And I'm going to have, these guys are going to be medium-sized Central Plain states. And they're all pretty relevant early on, similar to Lu, but due to their geographic position, although it's a very rich position, the Central Plains having extremely good farmland and being politically prestigious, there's just no room to expand for them, so they just kind of get overshadowed by the periphery states. Boo-hoo, yeah. They're all in D tier, sorry. Next up, we're gonna have the state of Song. Actually a very major Central Plain state, arguably. the most major one, if we just look at overall. One of my favorite philosophers from this period was at one point a minister of Song. The origin of Song is quite interesting because there's this thing in Chinese history where you're supposed to give like fiefdoms to the member of the previous ruling family, and we know that the Zhou dynasty overthrew the Shang dynasty, so they gave the Shang royal house the state of Song. Confucius is actually descended from members of the state of Song, which partly explains why he's so conservative with his philosophy, because he's literally, maybe a scion of the Shang dynasty, but please don't quote me on that. I don't know why I said that. A scion of this. Who knows? Maybe I'll have to look into that. But yeah, they're very rich, and actually one ruler of Song, that is the Duke Xiang of Song, he even makes a bid at being hegemon during the spring and autumn period, I believe after the death of Duke Huan of Qi. Unfortunately, he's known best for not succeeding and just making an absolute fool for himself, because he followed the rules of war and noble etiquette instead of actually trying to defeat your enemies. For example, letting them retreat across the river. Yeah, they're pretty rich throughout, and as Luis mentioned earlier, they get annexed by Qi. Overall, I'd say a bit more impressive than these other guys at the bottom here, so I'll put them in C tier. Skipping Wei. Not the other way, by the way. God. I don't know why my voice does that. It's kind of annoying. State of Wu. Arguably the most famous person from the spring and autumn period. That is Sun Tzu, is from the state of Wu. He was a general for King He Liu. And he and He Liu, along with some other guys who I've forgotten, launched an absolutely devastating invasion for Chu. They actually almost completely destroyed Chu if Chu didn't run to Qin for military assistance. But Wu is basically, it's like a one-shot wonder, kind of. It rises really fast and then just crashes to the ground very quickly. It's initially funded by Jin, who allies with Wu, because Jin at the time had a peace treaty with Chu, but it also wanted to keep dissing on Chu, so it just funds a neighbor next to Chu, and that was Wu. But Wu does almost too well, I think, and King He Liu almost becomes, he does become hegemon just because his army is the best in the world. But the certain King Goujian from Yue, actually, Yue was Wu's southern rival. He basically completely annexes Wu after defeating King Fuchai Wu, who is He Liu's son. And we'll get into that soon enough. Very rapid rise and fall, but the rise was pretty impressive, so I think I'll put them in B tier. Definitely a state that built itself off of tactics instead of long-term powers. Yan. These guys are in the northeast. Yes, they are a Huaxia state. They kind of fly under the radar for almost the entire period. They had to get defended by Duke Huan of Qi at one point. But they do become one of the 7 major warring states after some military reforms, and especially after King Zhao of Yan expands into the Gozhouxiong. How do you say Gozhouxiong? I don't know, I'm not Korean, man. He expands into Gojoseon, takes the Liaodong Peninsula, and even occupies Qi, as we mentioned. Yan has a lot of influence from the northern barbarians, adopts their dress and military style and cavalry, built some walls in the north, similar to Qin and Zhao. Otherwise, I mean, there's really not much else to say about Yan. I mean, they did pretty well. Pretty decent. Not pretty well. Pretty decent. So I'll put it in B tier. Just kind of a average to good state, I guess. Ooh, yeah. Alright. So, back to our conversation about Wu. Well, these guys are gonna be the destroyers. King Gojian of Yue will destroy Wu. Actually, at first, King Gojian and Yue are subjugated by Wu and forced into a vassal. King Gojian is forced to be a slave after attempting to destroy Wu early on. But even as a slave, he plots against Wu, and especially when he's sent back to Yue, the plotting really continues to ramp up. But basically, he weakens Wu slowly, and then when King Fuchai is in the north at a conference trying to become hegemon, he invades Wu. And this is just the first of several wars, but he basically chips away at Wu until he annexes it entirely. King Gojian of Yue is also the last hegemon of the Spring and Autumn period. I believe around 470 BC he is proclaimed hegemon. I'm kind of on the eve of the Warring States period, maybe a few decades too early. But it does show how people are not really caring about restoring the old Zhou political system anymore, because that was the point, well, at least the ostensible point of the hegemon system, is to restore Zhou authority. And skipping Zhao, Zheng. So, Zheng is the first state to be really powerful in this entire period. There's the Duke Zhuang of Zheng. He is sometimes called the first hegemon, although I don't really buy this claim, but I mean, militarily speaking, he did extremely well. He expanded Zheng a lot into all directions, so much so that multiple coalitions had to be called against him, which he defeated. But probably Zheng's most famous achievement is actually injuring the king of the Eastern Zhou dynasty at the time, which was really bad for Zhou legitimacy as the head of the Zongfa system, the feudal system, that is. But just like all other Central Plain states, despite their wealth and early prestige, they just don't have room to expand. And even during the middle and late Spring and Autumn period, they kind of just become a satellite state and a battleground between Jin and Chu, who are just absolutely duking it out. But still more impressive than Lu, so I'll put him in C tier. And finally, before we go on to the 3 Qin successor states, we have the state of Zhongshan. Nice little state in the northeast. They're at first in enclave or exclave, I don't know. They're inside the state of Jin. They get annexed by Wei, which gives Wei really weird geography. Wei is split into 3 parts. But they declare independence and basically become a thorn in the back of the state of Zhao, who very slowly chips away at them under the reign of Zhao Wuling, King Wuling of Zhao. They're mostly known for being annoying and surviving, which I guess isn't too special, but their geography is certainly interesting, as they were not in the Central Plains and yet managed to survive for so long when being repeatedly attacked by one of the strongest states in the north, which we'll get to. So Zhongshan, I'll put in D tier. Not a bad attempt at all. I like them more than Lu, but that's just because I don't like Lu very much. Dang it. What have I done? Oh well, you'll have to deal with that. And finally we have the Jin successor states. First we'll have the state of Han. And these guys are the weakest out of the 3 Jin successor states. They're very close to the Eastern Zhou crownland. Yeah, but as a result, they're also boxed in quite a bit. Kind of just tossed around as like a punching bag between like Qin and Wei and Zhao. Actually, preceding the deadliest battle of this period, that is the Battle of Changping, where 400,000 Zhao soldiers had to be buried alive. The casus belli for the Battle of Changping was because the king of Han sold his northern territory to Zhao instead of Qin, which pissed Qin off quite a bit. And they're also the first state to be annexed by Qin Shi Huang in his wars for unification. So that's why I'm gonna put Han in D tier. I actually have them as C tier on my reference template, but upon further consideration, they're more of a D tier, really. Okay, nice. Now on to the early on the most powerful of the 3 Jin successor states. Wei. These guys are the closest thing to a hegemon in the early Warring States period, especially under Marquis Wen of Wei. He employs quite a few very impressive ministers, such as Li Kui, who, in my humble opinion, is the first legalist. There's proto-legalists like Guan Zhong, but I don't really buy into that stuff. Li Kui, in my heart, is the first legalist. And also, I believe Wu Qi of Chu initially served Wei, Marquis Wen of Wei, but don't quote me on that. And also, the great irrigation canal builder and abolisher of shamanism, Xi Menguo of Ye County. But Wei gets a bit too arrogant. It's pretty rich and powerful, but its geography is not very good at all, because it's split into 3. There's one in the west, there's a chunk in the west, there's a chunk in the Central Plains, and then there's Zhongshan, and well, they do lose the control of Zhongshan later on. But the King Hui of Wei actually proclaims himself king, but then he gets is it him or one of his successors? They get dogpiled by a bunch of coalitions, one from Qi, one from Qin, and after that they just enter a slow decline. Their attempts to resist Qin were frankly not too impressive. Successful early on, but didn't really come to anything. Even Qi managed to succeed. So I'm gonna put them in B tier for their early power, but then rather miserable decline. They were still quite major, even by the time of Qin unification. Finally, we come to Zhao. Zhao was the last state that could oppose Qin unification, and they are the third leader of the vertical alliance. Unlike Qi, they do not actually succeed, but they go out with a bang at the Battle of Changping. King Wu Ling of Zhao had been expanding and having military reforms for quite a while at that point, and Zhao was able to basically leech off of the territory of Wei and expand quite a bit in that direction. But once Wei and Qi are gone, Zhao is the only one with a strong enough military, because Yan's too small, Han's too small, and Chu is just a punching bag for Qin. But yeah, Battle of Chongping, Zhao gets completely annihilated. Its army gets annihilated. Oddly, that Qin also takes some time to recover from the Battle of Chongping because it was exhausting for them as well. They also lost quite a few men and resources. But because their losses were both less severe and they had a stronger legalist and geographic situation, they were able to recover from their manpower loss, while Zhao was not able to. And after the virtual destruction of Zhao at the Battle of Chongping, Qin is basically unifying China without a doubt. Still, I think their opposition to Qin is quite impressive, and their rapid rise under King Wu Ling of Zhao should not be understated either. And I think they actually deserve to be in A tier. Although you could make an argument for them being in B tier either, but I think A tier is reasonable. Let's just say low A tier. But yeah, that is the tier list for the Spring and Autumn and Warring States. I have a few other tier lists planned. Well, they're all emperors. But I mean, emperors are a bit too subjective, honestly. I mean, the tier list, just making a tier list is, I guess I should make the disclaimer that this is all my opinion. But I'm thinking of a tier list of maybe the 16 kingdoms during the Eastern Qin period. Gates of Kilakian is basically carrying the entire Chinese history YouTube community on his back. Made a very good video series about the 16 Kingdoms period that I would definitely recommend watching. So yeah, continue grinding Chinese history, I guess. Now wait a minute. Han is missing. It should be in C tier. There we go. Okay, that's it.